Hey everybody, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. Today my guest is Karen Dillon, a New York Times bestselling author and three-time Clayton Christensen co-author. She's a keynote speaker. She's the author of a few books, including How Will You Measure Your Life? And recently, The Microstress Effect, How Little Things Pile Up and Create Big Problems and What to Do About It. We're talking about customer experience mindset today. We're talking about how to counter all those little cumulative micro stresses that add up and try to ruin your day. We talk about how to be a good leader and how to be a customer-centric leader. Please enjoy Karen Dillon. Karen, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. This is a podcast all about customer experience. And I actually found you in my research and reading about Clayton Christensen, the late Clayton Christensen. So I know you've worked with him. You've had an incredible career. You're an author. For our audience that don't know you, do you want to give us the high level about your background?
Sure. So yes, it was one of the great joys and honors of my life working with Clay Christensen. But before that, I had been ultimately the editor of Harvard Business Review magazine. And then Clay and I had a meeting of the minds, coincidentally, which led to a 10-year partnership working on books together. So I wrote 3 books with Clay before the end of his life. And it was an amazing 10 years to be able to do that.
Well, I just find his work so relevant today still, and your work. I know you have a mix of interest in business and then like self-development. It seems like mindset is a common thread. And some of the things I talk about on this show include customer experience mindset. So how to serve others and to find purpose and meaning in your work through service and through customer-centric leadership. Can we kick off by just hearing from you? What does mindset mean to you?
That's an interesting question, and it sort of has a lot of tentacles of important things. But a mindset, there are 2 things that I think are really important to think about when you think about mindset. One is, why are you doing the work that you're doing? Do you find and get some joy, some deep satisfaction, some sense of purpose in that work? Because if you do, you are going to be better as an employee. You're going to be better as a productive person, better as a leader. And I think for too many of us, that kind of slips or ebbs away over time because you lose connection with that sense of purpose for the work I'm doing on an everyday basis, not big, lofty life purposes. That's one. And then mindset, especially with your focus on customers, is so important to remember. That's part of why you're doing what you're doing, is to do it for the benefit of your customers, for your customers to get a product or service that they need to solve something in their life they're struggling with. And if you sort of lose track of that along the way, if your mindset gets sort of unaligned with that, again, you're not going to be doing work that is going to actually be meaningful to you. You're not going to be as effective at it, and you're definitely not going to be as happy on a day-to-day basis. So I think the mindset question and different sort of levels of it are really important to doing work that matters to you and doing work that matters to your customers.
So from your background, you are a mindset expert, and your book, The Microstress Effect, How Little Things Pile Up and Create Big Problems and What to Do About It. I mean, everyone watching this podcast has micro stressors that add up, whether that's work or family life. The world is a little bit of a mess right now. What are the main staples of your book on how to handle these micro stresses?
So the one of the key ideas of the book is that microstresses are so small and so routine, and they come in everyday interactions, tens of dozens of them in a day, that we almost don't even register that they're happening to us. Every individual microstress is something that you sort of washes over you and you kind of forget about, but cumulatively they add up to a real toll on you. You're exhausted and you're not doing your best, and you don't even know why. So it's just recognizing, number one, that microstress is taking this real toll, but it's largely invisible to people. You kind of bake it into your day and don't think about it. It's the best way I like to describe it to people is when you kind of find yourself flopping into bed at the end of the day and you're exhausted, but you really can't ever remember what you did that day. Like you don't even know why you're so tired. That's to us in our research, the product of a day filled with microstress, a day, a week, a month filled with microstress. So it's just recognizing that it's real and we don't have language even for talking about it. It seems silly to complain about some of these things, but cumulatively they just make a real difference. So that's the problem. The best thing I can say from our research, there were two things we learned from. We did a really deep dive with 300 high performers, and then we went on to do over 10,000 additional follow-up surveys, is that the people who deal best with microstress, meaning they're able to kind of get through their day, their week, their month, still doing high quality work, important work, still being high potential people, high performing people, but not letting that microstress make them feel exhausted every day, derailing them every day, are people, we started calling them the 10 percenters. They were the top 10% of the people in our research, and they did a couple of things better or differently than the rest of us. One is they recognized and saw microstress in their day, and they were unafraid to push back on some of it. It's not that you can make all those things go away from your day, but you can stop and change an interaction with the colleague that's more tense than it should be, or you can make sure you don't leave meetings without being really clear who's doing what are the next steps. You can try to find ways to not let a stressful conversation with a loved one kind of come with you to work for the day. They just became conscious of the toll of those things and push back on it. So that was one. They were unafraid to kind of ask questions and wait, we can't leave the meeting until, or I'm taking this off of my calendar because it's not the best use of my time. They did that better. And then the second thing they did, which was really a kind of prophylactic thing, getting them ahead of microstress, is they just made sure that they maintained what we call multi-dimensional lives. They didn't let their life become smaller and smaller and more narrow as they got older, which most of us do. As with each decade, our friend group gets a little bit smaller. Our work and our family dominate our time, which of course are the top priorities for most people, but at the expense of anything else. And so for people to look back and remember maybe the best version of themselves often is what we think of ourselves in our 20s, right? I went hiking and I had a really good group of girlfriends that we did, we went to concerts together, and I was just connected to everybody. That ebbs away little by little. And that, losing that multi-dimensions in your life means that every stress in the work or home takes on a bigger life for you. You don't have anything to kind of counter it. The 10 percenters, the people who are better at this, kind of found ways, even small ways, to maintain that dimension in their life. And they just made it a priority. And that helped almost inoculate them from some of the effects of microstress. And it was just a reminder how important it is to not let your life become too narrow as we get older and older, because we have too much on our to-do plate. These things are going to help you have energy and joy and purpose and put your own problems in perspective if you find ways to keep other dimensions in your life.
I love this topic. It's really relevant for my audience, for me as well. With little kids, it's funny. There's just no hanging your hat up at the end of the day when the work is done. It's mommy, 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 mommy. And it's all day from morning to night. And then the weekend blurs into the work week, and it sort of can feel like a treadmill. But empathy can really help with that. But I am always interested in people that have had careers and managed to be there for their family too, especially for women, because now we're at this interesting inflection point where we're realizing it is nonstop. So it's almost like, especially working mothers have to be like military, like soldiers. And it's hard because in your family life, you're vulnerable. In your work life, you need to be strong. And you kind of have to figure out ways to navigate all the different people in your life that need you and be there for yourself. And it's not easy to do.
Well, full well, I know this now that my kids are out of the house and I've been through that, but in that list of priorities, we often put ourselves last. We women often put ourselves last. So everybody else is fed and taken care of, but in some ways we become the last person. There's no magic formula to it, but the two things I've observed over my own career, and then my research sort of bolsters this, is that I think as a manager for years, I learned that there is no one more motivated to get work done than a working mom who loves the job, but also needs to get home. And I think it's just a reminder. We can model behavior by allowing, work days can end at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And as leaders and managers, if you celebrate that and don't make it this artificial, like leave your coat on the chair and to make sure people think you're staying there as long as possible or whatever, just recognize that people can work differently and still be super productive. And I think a motivated working parent, but it's in my experience, working moms is one of the most highly motivated people in the world. And the other thing is to remind ourselves that 197% of you might be better than 150% of a lot of other people. Like it's okay to be imperfect and and doing your best, and that's probably pretty good. And just again, this the oxygen mask thing. If you're giving everything to others in your life and you're sort of depleted of oxygen, the quality of what you're able to give as, as a parent, as attention, as a worker, as a colleague is going to be diminished too. So it's just really important. Even when you talk about it, the weekends are consumed by kids. I had the same thing for years and years and years. The people in our research who were better at navigating that found ways to incorporate them together. It would be, a family, little kids soccer game in the field in front of their house that whoever turned up. But so I'm with my kids still, but I'm also laughing with other parents and we're getting some physical exercise. They just tried to find ways to combine things until they could make more space in their life that gave them a twofer or a threefer. And that was very powerful for them.
I hope that women listening are just trying to figure out ways to not lose themselves, because it does feel like the years when your kids are really tiny, it is so tough to like hang on to your career, to who you are. And there's just a lot of factors and it can be really, really tough. Let's talk about hybrid work, which has been in the news in the last few months. We all heard the news about Amazon asking employees to return to office 5 days a week. Do you think that hybrid work works, or do you think people should be back in the office, or what's your take on it?
Well, I do think there is no one size fits all. There are a lot of it depends. But in general, I think hybrid work can work and can work well. But I think it requires some thinking. It can't be as simple as everybody do whatever they want, come in the days they want, don't come in the days they want. I think a lot of organizations with good intentions leave it very open. And what happens is the people who need to collaborate together or whose energy off of one another is going to be productive for everyone may not be in on the same days. And so I do think there's something really powerful about having some in-person, just spontaneous, connection and reminder and the small talk that you do in the office. I think that is powerful. But so I would think about somehow coordinating who do we need to make sure has some intersection with whoever else, and say that's a Monday and Thursday team. Can we have these people come in on Monday and Thursdays? I also think, again, as a working parent all these years, that giving people the ability to work from home and really work but control a little bit more of their day and save the commute time, whatever, can be a very powerful motivator for people to do their best work in sane hours. An ironic problem that happened during the pandemic that I think we're still working through, that may be part of where the return to work pressure is coming from, is that in the interest of no one can control the environment anymore. We're working from home. It kind of meant we lost the boundaries of the day because you just had to get to your desk or your setup for whatever the first meeting was. And instead of maybe a terrible day being, 8 1-hour meetings, we did more, let's make it a little more informal, but we did 16 half-hour meetings, and they were all still back to back. And the switching costs between one meeting and the next is real for all people. Like, what did I forget that? And that's one of the biggest sources of microstress, is that we do so much that you never have the ability to process what we just talked about. What's my to-do? What do I think about that? We just go boom, 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 boom. And that doesn't create a really healthy long-term environment. And you don't have time for the informal connections with people and all the really serendipitous good things that come from being around people. So I think what seemed like a good thing, everybody can work from home, no one has a commute anymore, turned into this actually kind of boundaryless, sort of overwhelming need to be constantly even being on a Zoom call all day, being on Zoom all day, you have to be looking like you're engaged and you have to be present, and it just takes a different toll on people. So I think recognizing that, although that created the opportunity for hybrid and even work from home, full virtual workforces, that you need to still give people some space in there, and you need to make sure that they are having the right kinds of connections with people, not just everything meeting related. I think there's a lot to learn in the swing back. So personally, I love a hybrid workplace. I like being in an office with colleagues, but I also like the ability to control how I spend my day. So I think it's sad if a workplace concludes the only thing to do is back to return to the office. But every workplace is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, it is sad because people might lose, like, let's say their workout or the breakfast, giving the kids breakfast in the morning, these little things. But I did post some videos that at the end of the day, it is your employer's choice. So if you really want full control over your work, I mean, I love working for myself. I always tell working parents, like, that's a really good choice if you can do it. Let's talk about stress reduction. This is something that I am obsessed with in my own life, in my work, about customer experience, that if you can make people's lives easier and better, it's just wonderful. So let's think about it from a customer experience perspective. Do you have any the tenets of your book on reducing stress that you think are relevant for everyone watching, no matter if they're in a sales role, a customer service role, or a marketing role? Are there like laws around stress reduction that you can share with us?
I would actually reach into one of the books I worked on with Clay Christensen on what we call the customer's job to be done, to discuss that, because in that book, it's a book on innovation. But the idea is that you're not going to create products and services for customers that they become loyal to and really love unless you understand what they're struggling with, right? And it's not, customers seldom buy a new iPhone for the colors, or they even though those are important upgrades and things, but it's that to create a product that people want to buy and
It's the
actually
job to be done, right?
it's the
What's
job to be
involved?
done is what's
Yeah.
the job they're trying, and that job involves struggle. What are they struggling with? What are all the stresses of as getting that job done? And that your whole offering, the way you talk to them, your customer service, the way you market to them, has to be about understanding that struggle as opposed to wanting that exact product or service, that specific, the sort of characteristics of it. And that can become a kind of really important cultural thing for your whole organization. If you understand that customers do not want to have to lose sleep over the report they're going to generate for their boss, right? And you put the way you talk about it with them, and the quality control steps that are in there, and all the fact that they don't have technical glitches. That's all about, I don't want to lose sleep. It's not all about, I need the product to have such and such specs. That their stress is something you're trying to solve or alleviate with your product or service. I think that's a really important thing to remember, and it touches everybody in the organization. The way you think about talking to customers, the way you support customers, the way you market to customers, the way you choose what you're prioritizing internally should be related to the struggle you're helping your customers solve.
I love that example. I've actually shared that in speeches about the milkshake.
Yes,
Why were
yeah,
customers
yeah.
getting the milkshakes at 8 a.m.? I mean, is that research you did with him?
I didn't do that research with him. No, I just wrote about it with him afterwards. But it's a really great, quick to understand example of understanding the customer's job to be done, the struggle that the problem they were trying to solve in their lives, which had nothing to do with the flavor of the milkshake or the size of the milkshake. But in this case, they were buying milkshakes in the morning because they were trying to make their commute more interesting and engaging. And that, you wouldn't think about that when you're trying to figure out how do we make people buy more milkshakes? We have more flavors, or we have more more mix-ins. It's sort of like we understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to have something that will last long enough that their commute feels a little shorter because you're sucking the milkshake through the straw. It maybe has a little dint of healthiness to it. Maybe there's fruit in it, or maybe because of the milk, it's not as bad as having a donut for breakfast. But it's a quick experience, so it doesn't get too far in the way of their commute. If you think of it completely in different terms like that, you're going to create a better product or service for people over the long term.
Yeah, and then we come back to your theme of stress reduction. Because if we're helping the customer on their commute to work, they put the milkshake in the cup console. It's a quick purchase. They have that milkshake that keeps them full till 11 a.m. And so it's, again, back to that. How are we constantly reducing stress for customers? Do you bring your ideas of stress reduction internally to workplaces? You'd consult about it. Is that something that you're doing now?
I do. I do workshops where I help people explain the idea of microstress, which is the basis of the last book I did, but also some of the work I did with Clay on how will you measure your life? How do you make sure that where you're putting your time and energy and resources personally as an individual, or for the things you care about most? I do workshops that help them recognize the challenge and the way that if you don't think about these things, it's going to kind of eat at you over time, and you're just going to find it. You're going to be stressed, and you're not going to be happy, and you're not going to be going in the direction you want to be. But if you think about it, you can do some things to make sure that you stay on course or reduce your stress. And one of the things that's always a kind of revelation for people in the workshop is it's not just the stresses that you can push back on that are coming at you, but ones that you are unintentionally causing others, that you can find ways to stop doing or mitigate, because that's always going to come back to you anyway. So it's sort of recognizing what's coming at you and what you're putting into the universe that maybe you could pull back on a little bit. And I try not to talk about, complete life changes. Nobody has time for a complete life change, but even small changes can make a really big difference in the long run. And if you don't start the small changes, you're going to find yourself way off course. It's recognizing that about yourself.
What you're talking about, Karen, is self-awareness, because so many of us, we're just not aware of these little micro stresses that we're actually making it harder for ourselves. Do you have any way that you splash cold water on people's faces to say, hey, you're making this unnecessarily hard for yourself?
I have people doing a self-assessment of all the sort of categories from our research of microstress that are often in our research we found systemic enough, happening routinely enough that they are actually causing people microstress. And I remind them that you're not seeing these, but pause and think about doing a self-diagnostic on what are the common sources of microstresses for you, so that you can even begin to think about, could I push back on that, or am I causing microstress? Or even one of the things we tell people to do is pick 2 or 3 that are happening in a recurring way that, you're not going to be able to change. Your boss is going to be your boss. Your boss is still going to have last minute ideas or whatever. You're going to choose, just make a conscious choice. I'm going to rise above that. I know that one's going to grind me down every time. I'm not going to let it spiral me. I'm just going to deal with it in the circumstance. So it's becoming self-aware about what you can control, what you might have to let go of, and then adding some positive things in so that it won't, any of those individual things or the cumulative toll won't grind you down quite as much if you have some positives in your life. And the positives can be really small things. It could be, I consciously started practicing what I was preaching after the research, just renewing some of my relationships that had just fallen to the wayside. Nothing terrible happened, but college friends and things. And it's turned into a really great, lovely, text group and a girls' weekend every year and some great trips. And that's really renewing, even if it's not every day. It's enough that there's something on the calendar and there are people that we can laugh with on something, even on text. Just those small things can really help kind of elevate your day in a way. Right.
It's about figuring out what fills your cup.
Yes. Yes. And consciously, that's the thing. Most of us are trying to survive the day, right? You're just trying to take what's happening and get through the end of the day. You don't pause to think about what fills your cup. And I think that's a really important point. Until you do, the balance may be really far off and you may not even be making, and you probably can make some small changes that will help fill your cup more. But if you haven't even paused to think about what does fill my cup, what does make me happy? In my case, I really like collaborating with people. So making sure that in the course of a week or a month, I have some projects and some work that is genuine collaboration, that's a positive. If I find myself too far in a hole of just working on my own, I realize that I don't have that cup being filled. So pausing to think about it and then kind of making some small commitments to yourself.
I love that. And there's something I've been reading about in my own research, which is you have to care a lot to be successful with work, but you can't care too much.
Right.
Because then something weird happens. How do you figure out how much to care without going overboard?
That's a really good point. It's one of the 14 most common sources of microstress in research with Rob Cross, the last book that I worked on, is managing or caring for others. And it's not what people often think is because it's such a pain to be managing other people. It's much more common in our research that people are microstressed out by they care too much about the people and they're finding themselves sort of over helpfully managing because they want them to succeed and they worry about them a lot. And they're not only carrying the mental load of their job, but the people who report to them or the people who they care about as colleagues. You have to find boundaries and you have to find ways that you're not enabling other people to count on you doing that, or you're the only one at work who's going to do the final proof on something important. That's not a strategy for long-term success for the organization or for you. You have to find ways that you find boundaries where you really add value and where you need to I'm done for the day. This is the best I did. It was the best I can do. And these three other people have a responsibility now to kind of pick up their part of it. And sometimes those involve discussions, not just assumptions. Like I'm backing off and hopefully it will work out okay. It's a conscious conversation. We without meaning to, we enable patterns with other people, right? If your colleague kind of is always overwhelmed and never quite finishes the joint report you're working on, and he or she knows, you know what, Blake is going to she's going to proof it. I know I'm not going to worry about that, or she's going to check the footnotes, or she's going to check the figures, without meaning to, and that person's overwhelmed, and you do it because you do care, and you do it every time. That person's going to count on you to do it, and then maybe that person doesn't do a 95% job next time. It's a 93%, and then at 90. And suddenly, again, with good intentions, with everybody just trying to survive, you've gotten to that point. That's a conversation that needs to happen. That's a conversation that needs to be, I can only do this. I need X amount of days. You need to do this. I'm counting on you to do this. And then when it comes in, did you do this? Sometimes it's just that we all make assumptions, and that can exponentially affect each of us individually.
Right. I love that. And I think delegating is really important too. And I've just heard like the importance of delegating, especially for people with little kids and their managers. And you have to be able to let go and not do everything yourself, because it's not possible.
And they're not all equally important. It's just that we're a culture of and all the time. We do something and we add this and we try this and we add
like my life.
and we well, for most of us it's true, right? We just add more, and I can do it. I can juggle. And many of us, performance reviews involve like, of course you did this, you were expected to do this, but we added these things to your workload this year.
Yeah.
I think not often enough is there a blank piece of paper approach, which there should be at an organizational level. What are the things that we're doing still make sense? Like we have workflows and processes that maybe have been in existence for 5 or 7 or 8 years. Do they still make sense? We should look from a blank piece of paper. What's the most effective use of how we work together and our time? And what maybe should come off that list or can come off the list to make space for other priorities? I think we just and all the time. And I think it's really healthy to like do a pause. Are these things all as important as they used to be? Well, you know what? Someone's been doing that report for 10 years this way, but does anyone actually read it? The truth is no. Let's let go of that, whatever it is. But having those conversations periodically is a really healthy thing for an organization.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your focus on micro stresses. I just think this is so important for everyone, for everybody. Let's get to know you a little bit better. Are you game for some rapid fire?
All right, do it. Let's do it.
All right. What's the most important part of your morning routine?
A cup of tea with my husband. It's the sort of beginning. He makes the tea. He's British, and we have fallen into that routine, and he makes it for me every morning. And it's the kind of check-in before we get going on with our day.
Love it. What show are you currently watching on Netflix?
I just finished watching, it's two episodes, but it was really interesting, called Into the Fire. It is a story about a woman who gave up a daughter for adoption years before, and through a long series of things, she ends up trying to find the daughter and learns that the daughter went missing in her adopted family's life. And it's the true life story of what happened when she started to try to figure out what happened to her. It's really good.
Okay, cool. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness is having my family around me in good health and being together in some way. For me, it's all about family and friends at the top of the list, and having experiences together that are happy and no stress, having a low stress to no stress, just joyous time together as family.
I love that. What is one mental health strategy for managing hard days?
I think, that's a very interesting question. I think self-care, just like be kinder to yourself. I think sometimes we bring home all the baggage of the bad day. It's just recognizing that was a hard day. And what do I need to do to unplug right now? And sometimes it's literally putting, don't open the laptop until the morning, or make sure you take that walk after dinner with your husband or a friend, or you call someone. It's just getting yourself removed from the stress of that day. I think people are hard on themselves and just allow it to grind them down, and it is grinding. But I think just be kinder to yourself sometimes. That was a hard day. A hard day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's your favorite type of vacation?
I just got back from a really great one, so I can say it was so traveling with my husband and seeing one of my daughters who's currently living in Spain. It was the combination of family and a cool and new place together, where just being in the pulse of another environment is really fun. I really love to sort of live like a local wherever we travel, and I'm open to all destinations. Just the idea of experiencing it as a local is really fun for me.
And if you could have lunch with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
I'd have it with my dad, who I just lost. So fresh in my mind is one more lunch, one more conversation. I would choose that.
And if you had to describe your outlook in one quick motto, what would it be?
It's an old saying, but I really like it. It's not the destination, it's the journey. I'm all about having experiences and learning things and doing things that change and grow and shape you rather than any particular end goal. I don't care about the goals anymore. I'm at that stage of life where I just want to experience things. And I think that's important to value.
Well, Karen, it has been such a pleasure interviewing you. So much fun. I hope you'll come back. And I just really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Blake. It was great to have this conversation with you. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
good. Everybody watching, please pick up a copy of the Microstress Effect wherever books are sold. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on social media, including Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and more.